Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is a new day, a new month, a new year. It is a fresh start all around. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about my January wrap up. I almost said TBR. I literally do this every time, guys. It's actually insane. This episode, we kind of have a lot to go over, a lot of books to go over in this video, so I want to get right into it and give you guys all the updates and all the thoughts on these books that I've read so far, and just kind of like a little brief overview of the month and how my reading's going so far, and kind of what the vibe has been for January. So let's get into it. Well, first and foremost, I managed to start off the year with a bang. I feel like last year I kind of went through this on and off of just being in the mood to read and then not, and just having just a lot of like ebbs and flows in my reading, and I was really nervous for the start of the year that I was just going to kind of fall into a slump, but I actually dug myself out of that and started off the year with 23 books in January. So I feel like it's going to be a little bit hard to beat that for the rest of the year, but I'm already kind of feeling myself like whoa moment for February, but we're still going good. We're still kicking. It's just getting back into routine. I feel like January was just a really long month and it was just kind of chaotic. I had a little bit of off time from work to read, so I think that helped a lot too. But yeah, I managed to read 23 books. I had a total of 11 physical books, and then 12 of them were audiobooks. So obviously a lot of the audiobooks are when I'm at work and stuff like that. Mostly just when I'm at work. You can tell I'm at work a lot if I read a lot of audiobooks. What I'm talking about is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This was actually a book that I had started, and I want to say it was like maybe not quite halfway through at the end of 2024 in December. I had already started it and I was hoping to finish it, but I just wasn't quick enough. Unfortunately, a series set in Italy, the streets of Italy. It follows two girls who are really close friends and kind of their childhood story. This book was very character driven, and I thought that I was going to love that because I love character driven stories, but it kind of just felt very mild to me. I feel like we were just kind of following these girls through their life, and I don't know, I wanted it to hold interest for me, but it just felt kind of like boring and lackluster to me. It wasn't my favorite. I thought maybe I would follow and continue the series, but I just don't think it's something that held enough intrigue for me. Honestly, I've forgotten a lot of the things about the book, and I think that for some people it would be really interesting. Obviously reading is subjective, and there is a market for that kind of book, but it's not for me. And I ended up giving this one, I think I gave it a 3 stars, but I honestly feel like it was more of a 2 stars just from like how I feel about it now. The next book I read was Girl in Bed 3 by Sarah Sheridan. This was an audiobook that I listened to, and I feel like almost all of the audiobooks I listened to were mystery thrillers. That is by far my favorite audiobook genre. Follows a girl who is just been attacked. She wakes up in the hospital with a bunch of stab wounds, and they are immediately asking her questions and trying to figure out what happened because her parents and her sister were murdered and her 2 brothers are missing. So they're kind of trying to figure out if she knows anything. And as we follow it, we kind of get more in depth about her story. As they start to question her, a lot of things come out about her childhood, and how her parents were abusive, and how she was very like neglected and cut off from the world, and you kind of start to figure out all of these things. And as this is going on, we're also figuring out a lot about the social worker that is on her case, and I think this one was really interesting. It was slightly predictable, obviously, but I still really enjoyed it, and I feel like it held my interest, which is really something that I'm looking for in a mystery thriller. Especially if it is predictable, then like I still need it to really hold my interest. So this one definitely did, and I really enjoyed it. The next one I read was also an audiobook, and it was also a mystery thriller, and this was The Maid's Diary by Lorith Ann White. This one I gave it 2 stars. I really did not enjoy it. It is following it kind of felt like The Housemaid to me a little bit, but like like I kind of thought that it was gonna give that vibe, so I honestly was like, oh, The Maid's Diary. I love books that have like a diary kind of setup, and I just thought that we were going to get this like one-on-one narration, and it was going to be really interesting. It was not. A couple that the maid is working for, they go missing, and it kind of looks like a crime scene, so they go into it investigating thinking this is a crime scene. but the couple is missing, the maid has disappeared, and the only person that they really have to get any information from is an elderly woman next door who woke up to screaming, and also the neighbor who's the last person they'd seen, I think. And I don't know, it just really didn't hold my interest. I feel like I just kind of stopped caring like about halfway through the book, and yeah, this one was a miss for me for sure. The next book I read was For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. This is a dark fantasy book. Very good. I'm pretty sure this is her debut book. And I really enjoyed the magical world in this one. I honestly wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this one because it's a little bit older, but I was honestly very intrigued and it held my interest a lot, more than I was thinking it would. This book is set up, the magic world is set up so that the first daughter is set to take the throne, and then the second daughter is sent to be a sacrifice to the wolf in the woods. Basically, in the past, a bunch of their gods have been sent to have been lost in the woods, and they're hoping that if they send this daughter that he will take that as a sacrifice and then send the gods back to them. And as being the second daughter in centuries, she kind of sees herself as cursed because of the power she has, so she is kind of grateful to go, and she ends up going and meeting the wolf, and he turns out to be a man, and obviously there's a little bit of romanticy there. This book I really did like. I give it 4 stars. I thought it was really good, but there were a couple things that kind of just like threw me off and kind of made me, there were just some things that I didn't like. I feel like the love interest, like I wanted it to be there, and like they definitely had some like nice angsty moments, but I almost feel like she was always reaching more for the wolf, and he was kind of like, nah, like get out of here, girl. Like obviously in a protective way, but it just kind of felt a little bit icky to me. Also, I am all for this sister, like the strong sister bond. I have a sister, I love it. But I feel like the sister who was sent to take the throne, we didn't get a lot of her storyline, but when we did, I feel like she was constantly just kind of set to be like always caring about her sister, trying to get her back, trying to save her. And I feel like Red, our main character, she just like was like, I'm good, I'm gonna stay over here with the wolf, and it just kind of, I don't know, it just felt kind of gross to me. I feel like her sister cared way more about her and did a lot more for her, and Red was not my favorite. So that part I definitely didn't like, and I probably will continue the series because I want to see what else is gonna happen. But yeah, there were some things that I loved, and there were also some things that I was not a big fan of. Then the next book I read was actually a graphic novel, Hungry Ghost by Victoria Yang. This book I gave a 3 stars. I think it was really good, and it had a lot of really good topics. It is a young adult graphic novel, I believe, but with a lot of good topics. It also was very hard-hitting. Definitely check trigger warnings. It deals with grief, family loss, just family issues in general, with like a toxic parent, toxic kind of parent relationship, and also eating disorders. I really feel like it had a lot of very strong topics and a good message for some people, but I also think it was a lot packed into one short graphic novel, so I think that for some people it could be really hard to get through. So honestly, just check trigger warnings if you're planning on reading this book. I honestly didn't really like look into it that much. I was just at the library, I was like, I just want a short book to read while I'm here. So yeah, I would just say check that, but it still was very good. Then I read Little Rat by Akwaeke Emezi. This book I gave a 3 stars. This was definitely I've read 3 of her books so far. This was my second favorite. I did really enjoy this book. I feel like a lot of her writing is very interesting. It's like nothing I've ever read before. She has some very immersive writing, and I feel like it has a lot of like double meanings, and I love her writing style, don't get me wrong. I feel like her books are very centered a little bit around like spirituality and also sexual. They're very sexual, they're very spiritual, and I really like this one. I feel like it was very interesting. It had a lot more plot, I think, than the last one that I read by her, and I liked the characters. I feel like the characters had a lot of like very dimensional characters, and I just really like this book. So, but honestly, I just think her writing is so good that like I will applause for anything she writes, even if it's not necessarily for me. The next book I read was Nightcrawling by Layla Motley. This book I gave a 4 stars. I really like this one. It is about a girl and her brother. I want to say they're like 17 to 19 years old, and they are trying to make it in the city as their rent is going up and they can't really afford it. They've been neglected by their mother and kind of taking on this role and provider, as her brother is just kind of like careless and reckless and irresponsible. He's trying to make it as a rapper, and he's more focused on that than kind of like providing for them and making sure that they have a home. So she ends up having to do some really hard things to make money, and she ends up selling her body on the streets. And this book, I feel like it is very hard-hitting, but it is a very like good topic to read about. And the next one I read was Late Migrations by Margaret Renkl. This was a 2.5 stars. This was kind of like a journal of essays, poems. I tried to really like it, and I feel like I just thought that it was going to be a little bit more of like a diary entry more than like essays, and it just really wasn't for me. But I still think that the writing was really good. Like, it was very poetic, and there were definitely ones that I liked more than others. But as an overall like a book, I just felt like it wasn't really something that I would maybe gravitate towards again. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This one was really good. I don't have this feeling very often, but every now and then I get the feeling that a book should be a movie and that it would maybe thrive more as a movie. This was definitely one of those for me, especially like Meryl Streep being the audiobook author. I'm like, she would play such a good main character in this. On this orchard with her 3 daughters, and they ask her about a story from her youth, and she starts telling them about how she was in these plays. She was like a theater kid, and she was working in the theater, she was acting, and she fell in love with this boy. And it was just kind of the story of her youth as she's telling her daughters, and they're kind of recounting and everything. And I feel like this book was really interesting, but it just had that feeling for me. Like, I can just feel when something would be like a good movie, and I feel like this was definitely one of those for me. Obviously I watched One Day and I love that movie, and then going back and reading the book, I was like, no, this was just meant to be a movie or a TV series. And I don't feel that way all the time. I'm not a film buff by any means, but I know when I like a good movie, and I just feel like this would be executed so well on the screen. I don't think it was a bad book. I just don't think that it was necessarily like, it just wasn't as hard-hitting as I think it would be as a movie. I don't know, like I just think it would be a really good movie. Sue me. Like, I love reading, obviously, but I think this would be a good adaptation. But I read One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This one I listened to on this one I read on my Kindle, and I like this book, but about halfway through, I kind of lost interest in the entire magic system. It is a dark fantasy about, oh, I feel like I want to give it another chance and I want to reread it. It just really fell off for me about halfway through, and I just found myself getting really lost and confused in the book. So I feel like this is one that I might go back to eventually, but I just think it wasn't really for me. I don't know, I thought that I was going to like it a lot more when I started it, but I don't know. Just about halfway through, I just found myself losing interest and not really wanting to continue it. So I think I just need to like restart the whole thing. But I ended up giving it a 3 stars. I don't think it was bad. I don't know. Maybe it just wasn't the fantasy for me. I really want to continue the series though. So I might end up rereading it at some point. I just don't think it's a time for me to read it. I went into a heavy Lucinda Berry. Like, I read like 6 of her books, and I want to briefly go over all of them because this video is already very long. The first one I read was Secrets of Us. This was a 3 star for me. I really enjoyed this one. It followed 2 sisters who have these 2 foster sisters who had a really strong bond as children, and as they're adults, one of the sisters ends up going into a psychiatric hospital after trying to murder her husband, and her other sister is a lawyer, and she ends up going to defend her immediately, and they're trying to figure out what happened as she's kind of going through this psychotic break and saying that this isn't her husband, and they're just trying to figure out what caused it. She's always been really level-headed before and never had anything like this happen before. So I really like this one. I think it was really interesting, and I feel like the story was just so immersive. And even as I kind of started to figure out what was happening, I feel like I was so in it. Like, this book was so immersive. I really enjoyed it. Then I read Beneath the Ashes I was not the biggest fan of this one. This is another mystery thriller audiobook. It was actually, I realized like probably about halfway through that this is the second book in a series, and I didn't realize that because I had just like randomly picked it listening to audiobooks. But I was not a fan of this one. I feel like, I don't know if it's because I obviously felt like I was missing things because it was the second book. I don't think that you need to read the first one, but I felt like I was missing things, and I just wasn't the biggest fan of this one. Then I read Off the Deep End by Lucinda Berry. This is a book about a mother who one night in winter she accidentally runs off the road into the river, and she's driving with her son and his friend, and she ends up saving the friend, but her son dies, and she ends up becoming racked with guilt and going through obviously a lot of mental grief and trauma. And then about 10 months later, the boy that she saves ends up going missing, and she's kind of looked at as they're investigating like maybe having something to do with it, and it just kind of follows a storyline between her and the boy. And I thought this one was really interesting. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I feel like the story was really interesting, but the ending was a little bit iffy for me. Read When She Returned. This one I gave it 2 stars. This is a book about a woman who ends up going missing, and they think after it's been like 10 years or something, they think that she's died. But then she ends up being found alive, and she goes back to live with her ex-husband, her husband, who is now remarried, and her teenage daughter. And she also has a newborn baby, as she's just been through a lot of trauma, and they're trying to figure out what happened and how she got here. And they kind of uncover a lot about how she went missing and the cult, that she was kind of tied with a cult. And this one was really interesting. It honestly took a lot of spins, but I feel like it kind of like, it had you right there, like this is what's gonna happen, but it kind of veered you off track, so you kind of lost sight of like, oh, it was right there the whole time, but I didn't see it because I just didn't know it was gonna be that, you know. So I think that this one is really good. I obviously don't want to say too much about any of these books because they are mystery thrillers, so like I don't want to give it away. I don't want to give away any book, but like obviously a mystery thriller, like you kind of need to like read it to understand. But I really did enjoy this one. It wasn't my favorite, but I still feel like it was interesting. Then I read The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This one has been holding my interest for a while. I just recently bought it like in January, and then I was like, I gotta read this. It's set in 1962. A family of Indigenous workers from Nova Scotia are in they're in Maine picking blueberries for the summer when, I want to say there's like 5 kids. The youngest girl goes missing, and one of our main characters, her 6-year-old brother, Joe, is the last person to see her. He ends up feeling a lot of guilt, and he kind of holds on to that throughout his life. As you get to see, it's mainly centered around Joe and his sister. But the girl ends up being found by a woman who lives this life under a different alias, and she doesn't ever know that she had another family until she grows older. And I feel like this was a very heartwarming book, and I really like this book. I feel like it wasn't quite as like impactful, or like it didn't pull me in as much as I wanted it to, but I still feel like it was a really good storyline, and it was very interesting for me. This was a book that I was very heavily anticipating, so I think maybe like it not being quite what I expected was just because I had very high expectations for it. I read The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. I gave this one 3 stars. I feel like this is the one that I always see the cover of, and like the most prominent Lucinda Berry book. It is about a couple who, they're both working at this hospital when this little girl comes in, badly abused and neglected by her parent. She is recently orphaned. Her mother has been killed, and she comes in very badly battered, and she immediately connects with the man. She immediately connects with this doctor, and he and his wife are having trouble they want kids, but they're having trouble with getting pregnant, so they end up taking this little girl in and adopting her, and they soon figure out that she just has a lot of episodes. She has a lot of trauma, and they kind of struggle with raising her. She struggles a lot with the woman. There's a lot of stress and angst in the relationship between the couple, as the little girl is like a huge fan of the dad but not the mom, and you just kind of see it cause a lot of like stress between the couple, but also with the mother, and like just her entire mental state kind of crumble. And I thought that this one was really interesting. It was really good, and it felt very long. It felt like a lot was going on in this book. It was just crazy. It was just a crazy book. This book was crazy. I definitely recommend this one. I read One of Our Own by Lucinda Berry. This one was a really short one. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I don't want to say too much about it because this one is set a woman who is like volunteering part-time on like a call line. This young girl who says that she has been sexually assaulted by this group of boys and that she is going to end her life. And the woman is like, she ends up saying that she lives in the same area as this woman. The woman is like, here's my number, like call me, text me if you need anything. They end up communicating. She finds out that this girl goes to the same school as her son, and it's kind of as she's still talking to this girl and trying to figure everything out and figure out if her son knows anything about it. I feel like this book was very predictable, but it was still very interesting. Although it was short, it was really good. Then I read Keep Your Friends Close by Lucinda Berry. This one I gave it 2 stars. It's about a woman who is like a socialite, and they have like this big group of women with their children in Hollywood, and you know, they're just like these elite women. It's very like catty and like, you know, very superficial, very catty women, and all of their drama. And as this one woman, they're having a party one day when one woman dead in the pool, and it kind of follows as we're investigating all of these different women who are at these parties and their different lives and what's going on and their personalities. And it takes a lot of twists and turns. It wasn't my favorite, and I feel like it kind of kicked me off the Lucinda Berry train, just because I just feel like I started to like lose it. I feel like the endings were just losing it a little bit for me with Lucinda Berry slowly as I started reading more and more. This one was not my favorite, but I'm still glad that I gave it a read, and that was actually my last Lucinda Berry book that I've read for the month. And then I ended up I read this book throughout the whole month, but I finally finished Lucy Undying by Kiersten White. This one is a Dracula story. It follows Lucy Westenra, who has died, and she ends up meeting another girl named Iris, who is kind of trying to escape her family, who is like very wealthy, and I feel like this book was really good. I think the writing was honestly hysterical. I love when a book has good writing and you're really in the mind of the main character, and I really love that about this book. I feel like when I was in it, and then once I left, like wasn't reading the book, I kind of struggled to get back into it. But I still think that this was a really good book, and I just love a good Dracula retelling. I love historical fiction, and I just think that this was a really good one. Very long, but very good. I read this manga, My Gently Raised Beast. This is just one that I had thrifted, and it wasn't really anything to write home about. It was just a quick read for me. I don't really think that I'm going to read it. It just felt very like cheesy, and I didn't really enjoy it that much, but it was just kind of another quick one that I read throughout the month. So nothing really to write home about. I honestly just wanted to get it off my shelf because I knew it would be something quick to read. But I will probably be unhauling this one just because I don't think I'm going to continue the series. I don't really think that it holds a lot of interest for me. I kind of went through a little deep dive moment, and I rewatched all of the Exo Kitty, first of all, on Netflix. And then I ended up rewatching all of the To All the Boys I Loved Before movies. Yeah, I did that, and I forgot how much I didn't forget how much I love these movies, but I just needed to like refresh my memory. And guys, Peter Kavinsky is the book Boyfriend Blueprint, but not in the books, okay? We're gonna talk about the books because obviously the movies they're just top tier. Everyone loves them. They're like a pivotal thing for a book girly. If you haven't watched them, watch them. I don't care how old you are. They still hold as being really good movies. But the books are not, unfortunately. I would say they're like a 2 to 3 stars. If we're just going off of like the vibe for like, if we're going based off the movies, 5 out of 5 stars. 6 out of 5 stars. I love those movies. The books are not. They're a miss heavily for me. I love Jenny Han, but these were a miss for me. And I knew that reading it because I feel like the characters were just so different between the books and the movies. Like, they were really just so fine-tuned in the movies, and they changed a lot of things in the movies, especially about characters, I feel like. And I'm all for a character not being that likable and having character development, but these were just like, there was never character development. I honestly don't like, this might be like a hot take, but I honestly don't ever think that like Peter was a likable character throughout any of the books. Like, I reread these books, so I know I never liked Peter in the books. Like, he was like, you wanted to root for him because I watched the movies and I love him in the movies and I love Lara Jean in the movies, like, but they just weren't likable characters throughout the books. So as a very character-based book series, I feel like it was a miss. But they definitely took off with the movies. Like, Jenny Han, she has some of the best casting I've ever seen in like throughout Exo Kitty, To All the Boys I've Loved Before franchise, and The Summer I Turned Pretty, obviously. Throughout all of those, so good. But the I don't know, just the series, just rereading it, I was like, I just wanted to see, because I was like, I'm watching the movies and I love Peter so much, but I feel like I didn't like him in the book, so I just wanted to go back and like refresh my memory. Yeah, still just not a fan. Just not a fan. Also, like, Chris was so off base in the books from how she is in the movies. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it might have just been like a time thing. I'm sure Jenny Han had something to, I don't know how much Jenny Han had to do with the changes between the franchise, like the books and the movies, but yeah, I love what she made. I just love how they were executed more in the movies, obviously. But yeah, anyway, that is all that I read for the month. I'm sorry that this was such a long video and that I feel like I just drawled on and I didn't really explain too much about the books, but yeah, I feel like I had an overall rating of like 2.5 to 3 stars, which was kind of sad. I feel like I had a really good reading month, and like quality, not so sure. I found out that I really like Lucinda Berry's writing somewhat. I don't know. I'm still proud of how many books I read, and I'm glad that I read all these books, but I am hoping that's not going to put me in a book slump. Don't forget to give this video a like and hit subscribe if you guys want to see more. I will obviously be doing a February TBR. I'm really excited about that, and then throughout the rest of the year, I'm hoping to have more books and hopefully hit our reading goal. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!